Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bone2Pick. We are coming to you today high above West 64th Street, about a block away from Lincoln Center. And our featured artist this month spends a good deal of his time at Lincoln Center. And for my money, he is one of the greatest French horn players of all time, probably my personal favorite, Mr. Phil Myers. Phil has been the principal horn of the New York Philharmonic for the last 33 years. And I think by anyone's estimation, he is a true virtuoso of his instrument. I have been very fortunate to work with Phil many, many times throughout the years here in New York in the studios, television commercials, motion picture soundtracks, CDs. I was very fortunate that he played on my Brass Nation and New Brass CDs, and anytime you get Phil to play on your project, you're going to get your money's worth, because he is just brings so much to the table as a musician and as a person. He's a very candid and honest individual, and I am really looking forward to this interview here this afternoon. Phil was gracious enough to allow us into his apartment, which is 35 floors up on West 64th Street, and I guess this used to belong to Ice-T, so evidently Phil's hip-hop career is not dead quite yet. But anyway, Phil, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule and for allowing us to come into your apartment today.
Yeah.
And I figured maybe we'll just jump in with how you got started in music as a young person, and I know you grew up in what maybe we could call the brass manufacturing capital of the world, Elkhart, Indiana. What kind of made you gravitate to the French horn?
Well, oddly enough, I started out wanting to play the trombone. And my father was band director. So, it wasn't one of those deals where they were saying the only thing we've got left is a trombone. No, and it was Elkhart, for God's sakes. So, I mean, you could have whatever instrument you want. Yeah. So I started out, I had a trombone at home, and I was sitting there playing it and stuff like that. And then the day came when you had to circle on a piece of paper which instrument you wanted to play. And I'm just looking down the list for trombone, and I go past French horn. And of course, I knew what the instruments were, because I'd grown up with my father being a band director. But still, at age 9, I was looking down this list, and as I was looking for trombone, I scanned back past French horn, and I saw French horn. I think it was the French horn. I thought, wow, that sounds classy. I like that. That sounds. And I circled it because the name French horn sounded classy. And then my father, looking at it that night, said, "I thought you wanted to play trombone." I said, "Yeah, I changed my mind." And that was it. Wow. It was so irrational, so irrational. You just don't know what the heck you're doing at 9 years old, So yeah, and then I just started. That was
That's
it.
great. Well, all the orchestral trombone players in the world are glad you found that to be classy and went to French horn, I'm sure. Well, who were some of your early influences musically, and maybe some of your early favorite French horn players that you got inspiration from?
Well, listen, I hate to say it, but I mean, in I started in 1958. I'm 63. So, I mean, 9 years old, I was 1958. There weren't like 200 horn records out there. I mean, The one that everybody had was Dennis Brain playing the 4 Mozart concertos. And I mean, I don't care what, I mean, that's everybody's favorite, no matter what instrument they play. And I think it would be impossible for me to play any of those concertos even now and not somewhat just be imitating what I heard as a 9-year-old, because he had such a great sound. They'd been able to represent that on an LP, I think even better than they ever were able to on a CD. And so it was such a fantastic example of what you wanted to sound like. And I remember, like, my father had a friend of his that he'd gone to Oberlin with. There was a horn player, Marvin Howe. He wrote a couple of horn methods, and he used to teach at Interlochen. And he came over, and he would, they were both like 40-something, and I insisted that he listened to this record, and of course he'd listened to this record 100 times, but he humored me. So I think that was the big one, and then of course I ended up going to study with we lived Elkhart's 100 miles from Chicago, so it was pretty close trip. Mm-hmm. And so I started out with Frank Brauch, who was the associate first horn player in Chicago. But then a friend of mine in Elkhart was studying with Clevenger, who had just shown up just shown up in Chicago. He just retired now, but he had just shown up. This was 1966. So I called him up and I said, I'd like to come, study with you. And of course, I didn't know what I know now, and that is when you first get to a town, nobody wants to study with you. So I was surprised he accepted me as a student. But the fact was, he'd just gotten there, so he was taking anybody that called. And I remember he said it's $20. And in 1966, that was a lot of money. And of course, driving in and out of Chicago was added to it. So I wasn't sure my father was going to go for that, but he did. So, and oh my God, I went into that lesson and I had never heard somebody play French horn so strongly, and I mean from 2 feet away. So I mean it was shocking and so inspiring. And I mean I heard that guy play so much with that orchestra in the next 7 years. It was just unbelievable. I'll just give you one example. I went to hear him play the Dvorak cello concerto, and it goes. Right, and on that second time around, he went. And he added almost, and I'm telling you, you could see everybody in the audience, including me, when that happened, everybody was, it was just such command of the audience. So anyway, it was very inspiring to be studying with him and being able to go hear him. And then one day I walked in and I said, I want to play a couple of things for you because I'm going to go audition for Oberlin because my father had gone there, my sister had gone there. And he said, maybe you want to go. I won't tell you what he actually said, but he didn't think it was a good idea for me to go to Oberlin. And so he said, you should go. I said, well, where should I go? Because I'd never thought about anywhere else. And he said, Carnegie Mellon. I didn't even know where that was. It was in Pittsburgh, but I mean, I didn't know that. And he wanted me to study with his teacher, Forrest Stanley. Well, I'd never heard of him. So this seemed like a really uniquely bad idea to me right off the bat. But that he basically what he said to me was this. He said, you have so many playing problems that you need to go to somebody remedial, somebody that can really change almost everything you do. And he says, I can't remember, he said I can't do it or I don't want to do it, but I mean, really, basically the idea was to get me with somebody that could technically get me straightened out. And, that was like, he was so right. Yeah, no, I needed that.
Wow. It's interesting. I've worked a little bit with Dale and of course been a big fan of his playing over the years. And I didn't know that the association that you guys had. So that's a great that you shared that with us. And I think knowing you're playing the way I do and knowing the history of Dale's playing, I can see the lineage between the two of you. You're very kind of the ultimate in brass playing to me. In other words, it feels like it's in your head and it comes out. It's like you're able to just translate almost the way you just sang that. You're able to translate your musical thought and not have to deal with the apparatus. Of course you do, but you guys both seem to be able to make that leap. So it's nice to hear that association.
You know what? I mean, when I think back on it, if you said to me, what's the one thing you got from studying with that guy? It was absolutely, no matter what you go to do with your sound, don't lose the strength of center. And I think at his best moments, the center of his sound was just so damn strong that it was really almost disturbing from 50 feet. It demanded your attention. And I think that I never was able to quite forget that. I mean, that becomes a goal that I just have to pursue pretty much any time I pick up the horn because it made so much of an impression. Yeah.
Well, it sure seems like you've got that as well. So I appreciate you sharing those thoughts. That's really great. So, following Carnegie Mellon, you held positions in the Atlantic Symphony Orchestra in Halifax, Pittsburgh Symphony, Minnesota Orchestra. Maybe you could take us through those formative years and what those experiences were like and how it maybe shaped you for what was going to happen to you later in New York. And I understand, we've talked about it before, somewhat turbulent times in there going through those orchestras, but maybe you could, as much as you'd like, share some of your thoughts about those years.
Well, I mean, the long and short of it is this. At every stage, you have to try and figure out what you need to know. And I mean, I started out, I got really lucky. I mean, the first 8 auditions I took, I lost 7 out of 8. But the one I won happened to be the second one I took. So, I've often thought that, the big difference between a professional and somebody doing it as a hobby is that a professional a lot of times got lucky enough to get a job early on. Mm-hmm. And then if you've got a job, you're getting to practice your stuff on the job. You've got time off the job to practice. Basically, you're just afforded more practice time than the guy that hasn't been lucky enough to get that job and ends up being a band director or something. I mean, he's probably got just as much talent as you do. He just doesn't have the time. And so I got lucky. I got a job, and the job really gave me a lot of time because it was only 5 services a week, and it didn't pay very much. But I had a house right on the Atlantic Ocean for $90 a month. The heat wasn't so good. The heat got a little cool, but it was. And here was a great thing. I could go on that job with a tuba mouthpiece on my horn and check it out, and nobody was giving me any crap. If I had started out and trying to just hang on by my fingernails in the New York Philharmonic, I think I would have been screwed, really. But I had a job where I could experiment. Mm-hmm. But then the other experimentation was going out and figuring out what the heck was going to work for me in an audition. And I just got to tell you, my solution to this was obscene. And that was, I came to the conclusion that what I was doing in auditions was I was going out and trying to hide my weakness as opposed to trying to present my strength. So I decided, what is my strength? And at that time, I felt my strength was playing loud, and my weakness was playing soft. That was quite clear to me. Every time I went into an audition and tried to play soft, I failed. And then I would consequently usually not even get into the second round. In fact, I don't think I either won the job or lost in the first round. I don't even think I ever got to an intermediate round. So I decided, well, you know what? If loud's working and soft isn't, I'm going to try that. And so that, along with doing a count-off, where I always breathed the same and always put the mouthpiece on at the same time, stuff like that, before each excerpt. So it became a count-off that I joined. I never felt like I was beginning an excerpt. I felt like I was joining a count-off. Mm-hmm. That, and I play everything loud. I decided I'm just gonna play everything loud. So man, they put the softest excerpt in front. I just played it loud, and all of a sudden I won 5 out of 6 auditions.
Wow! Doing
that, which is really obnoxious because I wasn't going out there and trying to be a musician. I was just going out there and presenting my strength. Period. Mm-hmm. I wasn't hiding my weakness because I wasn't even going near my weakness. And that really wow. Changed. That really changed. Isn't that crazy?
Well, it's a great idea. I mean, it's I'm going to try that myself.
Well, I formalized it in this regard. Now when I practice, since that time, when I practice, I try and spend 80% of my time doing my strengths, mm-hmm. and only 20% of my time dealing with the weaknesses. And I've come to feel with my students that if they spend a dominant amount of their time working on their weakness, it puts them into sort of a cautious state, mm-hmm. a state where they're thinking about their weakness more than they're thinking about their strength. So I really try and encourage my students to figure out what they think their strength is, and do that most of the time. Mm-hmm. I think that's the way to go. Frankly.
Yeah, I think it's a.
So anyway, that got me out of there to Pittsburgh, and then I had a weird scene in Pittsburgh where in the symphony business, in February you have to sign for the following September through September school year. And twice when I was in Pittsburgh, I won auditions after I'd already had to sign for the next year, and Pittsburgh wouldn't let me go. And the first orchestra that happened to was Dallas, and when I called up Dallas and said, you know, I can't get out for a year, they said, well, we're going to have to hire somebody. And then the next time it was Minnesota, and they decided to wait a year. So then when the next February came around, I didn't sign in Pittsburgh. They advertised your job the next day in Pittsburgh. Boy, they're at least at that time,
wow.
they were very tough. But I ended up going to Minnesota, but my deal with Minnesota was this. I was not a confident guy about changing jobs, and felt pretty secure in Pittsburgh. I was playing third horn, and I felt like I could do that job pretty consistently. But I didn't know going back to first horn, because I'd been playing first horn in Halifax, but like I say, it was not a demanding orchestra. I was afraid, so I said to the guy in Minnesota, I said, "You got to give me 3 years money. They can't give you 3 years. They can't give you tenure, but they can give you a 3-year guarantee on money. And then if they fire you after a year and a half, you got a year and a half of money to live on while you're trying to get another job, right?"
Sure, yeah.
So I said, "You got to show me 3 years, and then I'll come." So he gave me 3 years, right? 6 months later, I won this job. They went without a first horn player for a year. Then they gave me a 3-year contract, and then after 6 months, I went in and said, "I want out of here." And I'm telling you, that guy was a very nice guy, but his initial reaction was not positive. And
So making you almost as popular as Kevin Garnett in Minnesota for you basketball fans.
So I said, well, listen, you know what I said to him? I said, "If you were in my position, what would you do?" And I said, "Well, okay, you're right, you gotta go." So that was it. Then I came here, and Warren Deck was already here. Phil Smith was already here. Laskey came about 5 years later. I joined a horn section. Personnel didn't change for 13 years. Then it changed entirely, and right now we have one man who died, one man who moved to first horn in Metropolitan Opera, and one man who was in his late 60s and retired. So we're down 3, and we've been down 3 for 5 years. We only have 3 people in our section, and everybody else is coming in on a temporary basis.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.